What do you even say, Georgie?
When a kid is in the womb, they are as safe as they are in a classroom.
Not an American classroom.
No,
maybe an Australian classroom.
Maybe an Aussie classroom. Great. I don't know. What a year it's been.
I know, right?
What a last 2 months it's been there. The United States erupt as the Supreme Court votes to overturn the right to have an abortion.
Plus, climate change activists cause chaos in our major cities. Are they on the right side of history or just a pain in everyone's neck?
And bye-bye boomers. Census results reveal the changing face of the Australian population. I'm Georgie Tunny.
And I'm James Law.
And this, for the 20th time, a double decade, raise the bat, is Flash Drive. J-Law.
So proud.
We've made it to 20.
So proud.
You don't look a day over 19. This is so exciting.
I am excited. It's been good, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And we've been apart for a couple of weeks.
I know. I love
Missed
that
you.
our notes literally say, oh my God, missed you. And I really did. However, you did a great job over the last fortnight, I've got to say. I've been listening, and you and Liz nailed it.
She's good, isn't she?
She's really good.
Punchy, Liz.
Really good. So listeners, don't worry. I reckon we're going to be hearing more from Liz throughout some of the next few episodes as well.
Get her back.
Get her back and see what she's working on, what stories and stuff. But it's been a pretty big couple of weeks.
There's
Not
been a
much
lot
happening in the news cycle. Hey, once again.
Yeah, some days it's been like, wow, okay, there's a lot doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like this has been one of those weeks in particular, both for good, interesting and bad reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready to go back.
All right, let me hit you first.
Okay.
This is a big one. So we start in the US, where obviously this week there was a monumental decision that has many Americans, especially women, up in arms. The US Supreme Court has ruled to overturn Roe v. Wade, and what this means is effectively Americans no longer have a constitutional right to have an abortion. So what the decision does in effect is it takes the right away, and it's no longer up to the court to make this decision. It goes back to the states. And as many as like half of the 50 states in the US have now signalled that they've already banned abortion or will do so very quickly. So it's quite a big change for the states. Here's how US President Joe Biden and the Democrat AOC reacted.
Today, the Supreme Court of the United States expressly took away a constitutional right from the American people that it had already recognized. They didn't limit it, they simply took it away. That's never been done to a right so important to so many Americans. But they did it. It's a sad day for the court and for the country.
I think it's important for us to also tackle this myth that this is somehow about babies or children or life. Because the same individuals who claim to be protecting life fight against universal health care. Do they believe in universal child care? Do they believe in life after birth? From their policy positions, I assure you, the evidence is lacking.
So, Georgie, this seems like one of those things that as an Australian, it can feel a bit hard to get your head around, like, what is going on over there where an issue like this is so front and centre in their national discussions and it tears the country apart. What did you make of the decision this week?
I feel like it's like a phone was ringing and you answer it and it's like, hi, the 50s, 60s, 70s are calling and we're back there. Because front of mind for me, other than what an absolute horror show this decision from a woman's perspective, my personal perspective is, it's an active step backwards. So it's not progressive, it's not looking to be progressive, it's not looking to stay the same and just be where it is right now. It's an active step to go backwards, and it's against the popular opinion of the country. Like these 10 Supreme Court justices, they only need 5 to have such power and such sway, and therefore they're now able to speak for the whole country and a significant portion of the country being women. And I find it absolutely abhorrent that this could be a thing. And people can tell you what you can do for this issue in particular as well. I find just it kind of melts my brain a bit, because I just can't even fathom that if I was in a position where I was pregnant and I didn't want to be pregnant, that then I was forced to stay pregnant and have the baby, and then what? Like it's just such a crazy decision for me.
It is. And you know, how did it feel as a woman in Australia? Because I've heard from some colleagues and stuff that, you know, a lot of women friend groups have been like firing up group chats and be like, can you believe this? That like, even though it doesn't affect Australians, the injustice of it has kind of really riled up women here. Was that your experience?
Totally. My friends, a couple of my best friends, they live overseas, and one of them lives in America. So it's obviously very front of mind for her with what's going on over there. And we were just conscious of that and checking in, being like, what's going on? Because it can be a lot when decisions like this are made and the news is everywhere. But even my girlfriends here, based in Australia, you know, thank goodness there's no sign of anything like this on the horizon. However, for it to even happen in, you know, a leading superpower, a leading Western superpower, of course you're going to have that moment of, well, what could it happen here? I mean, if it happens there, could it then happen here? And girlfriends of mine who've had abortions as well, it's very triggering for them to be like, well, what, this sense of global judgment, I guess, when they've not asked for it, they shouldn't be even aware of it. Like, it's just such a personal issue. And I think that I struggle to find the words to kind of figure out what it means as a whole for women. Because once again, it just says, well, you can't be trusted to make your own decisions. You can't be trusted to have autonomy over your own body. You can't be trusted to know what you want. And I stand by that. If white men in particular were able to get pregnant, you would be able to get an abortion out of a vending machine.
It's true.
It's true.
It's definitely true.
It's true. 100% true. And that's what I find so infuriating, and that we're still having this discussion, and we're going to now, because now I'm just terrified for what's next.
Right.
Because this is abortion. Yep, it's going to be so difficult for so very, very many people, and unfortunately the most marginalised people in America, being people of colour, people who don't have access to healthcare anyway, will be put in these positions. And I'm so sick of the argument or the pro-life debate, which I'm actually quite pleased that a lot of the reporting, at least that I've seen, is now calling that anti-abortion rather than pro-life. Like, it's a small change in language, but I think it's important, because pro-life, to me, I get confused. Because pro-life, I'm like, oh yeah, the woman's life. The mother's life. Yeah, you got to be pro that.
Well, even Trump, I remember when he was asked about this when he was running for president, he got confused about which was pro-choice means what, pro-life means what. He didn't even know.
Yeah. And the thing I find just it's with a lot of things, right, is that if you do not like abortions, don't have one. It's not hard. Easy. It doesn't seem hard to me, and that's what it's. Whenever everyone gets so up in arms and up in a flap about what everyone else is doing, don't worry about it.
Well, but a couple of things from it, like, it's a really big symbolic change, but the truth of the matter is it will not stop people having an abortion in the States, because you can just drive over to the next state where it's legal, the closest state where it's legal, and have one there. And, really what it will do is for people who can't afford to go to another state and get an abortion, it'll just be for them who will have to go through with the pregnancy, really. That's the practical thing. So to me, that it all kind of starts to collapse anyway, where people, it's not going to stop people from having abortions, and it'll probably encourage people to have unsafe abortions, and it'll favour the rich people, and it'll be the vulnerable people who really cop it, I think.
Oh, so much so. And one of the bits, again, that I find so infuriating is that people are like, well, you can't have an abortion. It's like, cool, well then I'll make sure that I'm on really effective contraception. It's like, oh, well, you can't have that either. Because that's, one of the other things now. that could be taken away. I think there were 3 major issues that could be next in the firing line when it comes to the Supreme Court and giving, the states back a lot of power, which could be contraception, same-sex marriage. There was another one, but I can't remember what it is now.
I don't know either, but yes.
But some other huge human right. too. Some other injustice, which just, it seems like you can click your fingers now, and that's it. As someone who's lived over in America for a prolonged period of time, J-Law, you would have covered lots of decisions, but can you just run me through like the power of the Supreme Court? Because I get a little bit confused with that too, because all of the polls and everything coming out of the states, they are for abortion. They don't want it gone. And yet 5 people have been able to say, whatever, it's up to the states. Yes,
well, I mean, this is the thing. It's about, really this decision is about the primacy of the Constitution in American life. So the Supreme Court, does not need to answer to voters. That doesn't matter to them. So, just to go back a few steps, the reason that this was possible, like Conservatives have wanted this to be overturned for decades. It's been in place for about 50 years, and they've been pushing for ages to try and get this kicked out. But it was this is another consequence of Trump as president. So when he was president, a few vacancies on the court came up, and he ensured that conservative judges were placed in there. So now the conservative voices have sway on the court, and then this is how it works. Then they can undo some of these things that more progressive judges have put in place over the decades. So, I mean, ultimately, it's not really up to the people. This is the way their system works. Now, to play devil's advocate for a little while, I think it's important to hear the other side of the argument and what they are arguing. So in conservative America, they are praising this decision as actually a win for democracy. Let's have a listen to a bit of Fox News to explain their argument.
Emily, the bigger point here is that this is returned to the states. So if the left is so convinced of their political argument, instead of taking a blowtorch to police officers, take it to the ballot box.
That's exactly right. We've talked before that with everyone missing the entire point of the substantive argument of Roe v. Wade, which is basically restoring the power back to the people, right? It's actually increasing everyone's individual power because it's restricting the government's authority and the government's power. And that is what the intent was behind the Constitution. How many people actually submitted a call to action that would put someone in office that reflects their actual views? How many of them supported a constructive argument, a constructive suggestion that would actually affect policy change, right? All they are hand-wringing and losing their minds, but they're missing the entire point, which is that it restored power to them that they can now achieve through voting and election.
So, Georgie, what the Conservatives are saying is that this is a win for democracy, right? So this takes it out of the hands of, some crotchety old judges and puts it in the hands of all these states, and that they are, representative of the people. So actually, their argument is this is a win for people power. And if you want to change the result, then you should vote them out. Doesn't that make sense?
What about, my argument, my counter to that would be, what about if you were, say, a black teenager that is born into a state that doesn't then have the power, one, to vote people out. You're born into an ultra-conservative background, you're the victim of abuse or something like that, and you then are forced to have this pregnancy or carry it to term, and that's not something that you're equipped to deal with either mentally or physically. I think that is the people power argument, I think, is all good and well to say, but in practice, it's not really serving the people who this would affect the most. So by these 5 people deciding that abortions, the power to have them or not have them, is going to be handed over to the state, you're not catering to the people within that state who are most likely in need of it.
To be affected by the decision.
Yeah. So just why make it harder for them? It's already, a lot of the rhetoric in America too has been, for people who are, see, look at me, I was like pro-life, no, pro-choice. People who are pro-choice and are for abortion rights. That's like, it's a deeply personal decision. It is, obviously a lot of thought goes into it, all of this. Which is true, I would say, in a huge majority of cases. But also, people, even if they may not they just don't want to have a baby, even if they have all of, you know, the access to healthcare, they're in a good position financially, they have the support, they're well equipped to look after a baby by themselves. That they should still have reason to be like, yeah, but I don't want one. It's not good for me right now. That should still be a perfectly reasonable thing. Which again, if you're in a state that you can't have access to that, it just makes it's another little hurdle.
Yeah.
You know? So I can understand somewhat, and I do hope that this does then motivate more people to go out and vote for a way which is favour of rights. But I still just don't think that the youth vote is there yet. I also think it's pertinent to point out, J-Law, that when huge monumental decisions like this happen in America, it often does lead to like a culture war, and Australians, especially on social media, seem to take it up, and it's like a call to arms to be like, we must preserve and save the right to abortion. No one's coming for your abortions here in Australia. Thank goodness. Few. No one's coming for them here, and hopefully we never get to a stage where it's even on the table, on the topic of conversation for that to happen. Although I do think that when I was growing up in Brisbane, I do think it was actually illegal to have an abortion at some stage within Queensland, which I did not know at the time. So I think I know that we have these, you know, this progress, and it's probably quite new and newer than a lot of people do think as well. I mean, Roe v. Wade, it was only, 50 years ago?
In the 70s, yeah.
Yeah, 50 years ago, which I'm like, what? That seems like only yesterday.
Yes. Well, I'm always thankful when, you know, we have a federal election and they are not about things like abortion or gun rights or anything. They're about healthcare and, you know, about where we spend our money, our taxpayer dollars. Like that makes me proud to be Australian, to be honest.
Do you think gone are the days where we hold up America as this ultimate what we should be like and try to emulate?
I think a lot of paint's been stripped off them in recent years, yeah. Let's give the final word to Trump's former spokesman, Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, she's running for the governorship of Arkansas at the moment. Oh. And to Aussie ears, there might be a tiny little bit of a contradiction in what she had to say on the issue.
We will make sure that when a kid is in the womb, they're as safe as they are in a classroom, the workplace, a nursing home, because every stage of life has value. No one greater than the other.
What do you even say, Georgie?
When a kid is in the womb, they are as safe as they are in a classroom.
Not an American classroom. Maybe an Australian classroom.
Maybe an Aussie classroom. Great. Like, that's just... the fact that you'd say that with a straight face, and that Sarah Huckabee Sanders can say that with a straight face and mean it. Oh, America.
The hypocrisy of the place.
The hypocrisy of it. God. I don't know what this means for them, quite frankly. I don't know. What a year it's been.
I know, right?
What a last 2 months it's been there.
Yeah, let's get out of America. Let's go to Australia.
Okay, let's do it.
No madness here.
Remember, Flash drivers, if you're loving the podcast, of course you are, let us know. Subscribe on your favourite podcast app, leave a review, tell your friends, spread the word. Earlier this week, Sydney CBD was taken hostage. Too strong a word or okay?
No.
We're going with it. Taken hostage by climate protesters. Blockade Australia, which is a fairly radical group, is fair to say, marched through the city on Monday morning during peak hour. They tossed bins, other kind of paraphernalia onto the road behind them, which hampered police and caused huge traffic delays. But the biggest disruption came when 22-year-old Marley Cooper allegedly parked a car across the entrance of the Harbour Tunnel and chained herself to the steering wheel. We do have some audio of how the other commuters on the road at the time reacted to Marley's actions.
There's a really angry person who's coming up to the car who has been threatening me with violence.
You f***ing everyone stay up, you dumb Get the f*** out of the way!
Okay, so a dozen or so protesters, including Marley, who you just heard from in that clip, were arrested on the day. There's been subsequent demonstrations since, but I don't think anything as day-altering as Monday's action from Blockade Australia. J-Law, first off, your thoughts?
I think that what they're trying to do is probably noble, right? They want to try to get Australia to act stronger on climate change. I agree with that. But the way they go about it is so counterproductive to their aims. They just, really in Australia, I mean, this sort of fits with what we've been talking about. In Australia, if you want to make change, you've got to kind of convince the sensible centre, right? The sensible centre see these people blocking roads, annoying everyone, just trying to live their lives. And it actually does their cause a disservice, I think. This is not how you make change in Australia.
How do you make change? How do you make the change without the protest, without this disruption?
It's how you vote. It's how you lobby people in power. Blocking the Harbour Bridge is not going to make an ounce of difference. And there's climate change activists in Newcastle who, for years, blockade the railway lines between, the coal mines and the port. They've been doing it for, ever since I went to uni there, which is like a couple of decades ago now.
Has the coal mine shut down or anything?
Well, one of them is going to shut down, but for economic reasons, not because of these guys.
No.
I mean, they anyway, my point is they have not made even a tiny little bit of difference to that cause. So I just think that they're not helping in the way that they think they are. They're doing the opposite.
I have to agree. While I can, I mean, what did you make of the video that was released by Marley? Her sitting in the car, the guy absolutely irate, yelling at her, which I think was a lot of commuters on Monday morning. They were sharing that sentiment. And I think that the Batuta Advocate, of all places, really nailed it. They put up a meme which was like, climate activists decide to, make blue-collar workers miss their jobs in a cost of living crisis.
Right, yeah.
And I'm just like, I think you're right in it's misdirected in terms of they've nailed the disruption, tick. That's what they're about. But that in itself is all about awareness, right? So I think one of their major policies, or what they're trying to do, their main aim is to get awareness in so that then you can force the government to act and make meaningful change. But the awareness around the climate crisis, I would say, especially in Australia, is probably at an all-time high. I don't necessarily know if that's what we need right now, let alone what people who are trying to get to work on a Monday would be able to, how much of the climate crisis could they solve? Yeah.
Well, I looked up what their manifesto is, and what they were trying to do with this. They've been calling it a resistance. And they said that they wanted to block Sydney's major roads. If we stop the city moving, we halt the system that is endlessly expanding, exploiting and destroying. This means the people in power have to take us seriously. So that's their argument, but I think that people do not take them seriously.
Didn't the New South Wales Premier come out and just call them idiots or something?
That's it. They get their perhaps noble points just get lost because they just seem like annoyances.
Yes. And we actually spoke to one of the climate protesters, Marley Cooper, on the project this week. That interview has been both slammed for different reasons. One, it's been slammed by people by being too soft, and the other hand, it's been slammed for being too hard and attacking a climate protester who's had a really tough time and been a direct victim of the climate crisis from Lismore, with the Lismore floods. I did find it interesting though, and often I find it interesting when it comes to the crux of it and you ask protesters to explain why they've gone to these lengths. And you're right, the sensible centre can totally see and be sympathetic to the climate movement and want to help. But then they don't help themselves with having a real clear cut message with meaning that people can go, identify and be like, yeah, that makes sense. Instead, they take these radical means and methods and it just puts people right off. because I think even when we were talking to Marley, it was hard for her to articulate what she was doing. She obviously had so much passion and a lot of bravery to do what she allegedly did, but it's something that she was like, you know, I remember her saying she doesn't want to, it's not for her to decide how people think or encourage people to think either way. And I'm like, yes, but it kind of is, because you're
trying to convince people.
You're trying to convince people. So there's a lack of meaning there in what they're doing, I think. An accessible meaning maybe is the way. Because ultimately you want to get people on your side.
Yeah, but I think that they're probably not looking at it that way. I think that they probably see the inaction that Australia's had on this issue for decades, and they're just like, enough, I'm going to do something really brave and, you know, in their minds altruistic and kind of like bold, and that in itself they think is the whole ball game. But I'm like, surely you should judge your movement on what change you make, and I don't think they've made any. And as I keep saying, I feel like it puts the cause back.
I always find it hard. It's such a hard thing as well, because the cynic in me, I always go, it's really like, of course, when there needs to be urgent action, I'm 1000% behind it. There needs to be urgent action from a whole lot of big businesses that are way huger than the individual, right? So it's like, yes, I've got to keep cup. I'm trying to be as environmentally conscious as I possibly can and limit my own emissions, but how much is one person in the
What
cog?
can you do?
I hate to be so cynical about it, but
yeah. Well, look, a mate of mine wrote, just to put the other side, he wrote on Facebook, he's like, since when did protests have to be so polite? Right?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's kind of the point of it, to get people's noses out of joint. So
That's
look, they've
true.
done that.
They have, and just as many like criticisms I've seen on social media being like, these bloody idiots, what are they doing? There have been people being like, so brave that they're taking this action. This is what we need, more of it. At least we're in a society where we can see it. See both.
That's nice.
That's nice.
Also, stop blocking the bridge.
Oh, and also train strikes, can we not?
Don't get me started.
While we're on it.
Love hearing us unpack the biggest headlines of the week? Make sure you follow Flash on the socials so you don't miss a moment. We're at Flash News AU on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok and YouTube. Get on it.
J-Lord, do you happen to hear those little bells? The sound of snow falling, maybe?
Hark?
A hark, yes. A heralded angel from the team demographer. Too much?
Where are you going?
Yeah, okay, look, it was probably too wide a bow there that I've tried to draw, but it was Christmas for demographers earlier this week because, tick, 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 it was Census Day, or really like the results of Census Day, because technically the day of census, I guess, is when you do the census.
It's taken them a while. They've been crunching the numbers.
I know. So if you can think back, listeners, to, I think it was early August, maybe second week of August last year, you would have been asked to fill out a whole bunch of data about who you are when it comes to Australia today and the face of Australia. And it turns out that we're younger than ever, we're less religious than ever, more culturally diverse than ever, and more of us have given up on the Aussie dream of home ownership.
Classic.
Were there any shocks and talking points? Talking points, lol, that's what I've literally read there. Were there any shocks for you, J-Law, in terms of what we gathered from the census, the new Australia?
Well, one thing that I thought was interesting was that there's a much higher proportion of Aussies now in single parent homes, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of a big change. It feels like people are much more happy to get divorced, much more happy to live separated lives where the kids, you know, are shared. I don't think that's a big surprise, but yeah, the numbers were quite stark about how much that is changing.
Yeah. I saw that as well. I also found that just housing in general to come out of this particular census, I found that really interesting. I think the amount of people that were now living in caravans is up like something like 150%, like
Wow.
60,000 households in caravans for whether it be the cost of living crisis, the inability to be able to even dream of affording a home, let alone having the funds and the ability to achieve that. It could also be, though, people at that time, it was, what were we, halfway through last year, which was lockdown for Sydney and Melbourne, and regional Vic, New South Wales and the ACT, I think, we're going to go into lockdown. So that's about 15 million or so Aussies who were in lockdown while they were filling this out, which on the one hand is great for demographers because they're like, we've had such a great response to the census. So many people did it.
It's the highlight of my week that week.
Because literally a captive audience at the time that this was done. But also on the other hand, it just makes me think, okay, well, at that time, though, surely it's not an accurate snapshot of how Australians usually are. So therefore, is this data actually, does it already have an asterisk? Is
a bit skewed?
Yeah, is it? They assure me no.
Okay.
The demographers I've spoken to this week are like, no. We can still gain so much.
Okay.
So much from this.
I trust the demographers.
I trust them too. The biggest thing, I think, one of them, millennials. We're in the age of the millennial. Because for the first time, equal number to the boomers.
Yeah.
What do you think that could mean for Australia?
Yeah, well, I think it's can only be a good thing. I honestly do. You know, to me, it moves the political centre of gravity from boomers to my generation.
Yeah.
That's not happened
Mine too.
before.
Yeah.
I'm a bit more of a geriatric
Geriatric millennial. Copyright that. That's a flash drive copyright. We can get the merch.
Millennial.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, certainly in my lifetime when I've been voting and when, people have been trying to win my vote, it feels like most of the benefits did not flow to me. You know, baby boomers continue to get all kinds of tax breaks. They get better incentives to get into the housing market that have pushed my generation out of the housing market altogether. They've been neglectful on climate change.
Yep.
They have very different views about work-life balance and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like the more of us that are represented, the more, the political pendulum might shift towards what we care about and things being a bit fairer.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
What do you reckon?
Good. I'm excited if that happens. I think that would, because, we are millennials, both of us, that could only be a good thing. Yeah.
Bring it on.
So that would be really nice, actually, now that I think more of it. What do you think? Because I think it's a similar thing. Maybe it's a similar thing. But in my head, the fact that Australia is now less religious than ever, like Christianity is still the dominant religion, but more people than ever have said they don't identify as having a religion. Do you think that impacts any kind of policy? I know everyone's like, politics, religion, meh. But do you think that has any sway with anything that could happen down the track with policy making? Are we, done with catering to the church somewhat?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're a secular society and, simply because you don't follow a religion doesn't mean that you're sort of morally corrupt or anything like that. I'm a bit of a heathen, but I'm okay about that. I don't know. I think it represents the way that people live their lives. I don't know that, I think people are happy just to live their lives without that. And it's just more common where religion isn't as central in Australian life anymore. I don't have a problem with it.
Interestingly, Jediism fell off pretty much.
Oh, really?
No one's really identifying as a Jedi anymore. Remember when that was like
that?
That
was a gag,
that as a gag religion was just rocketing up the census, but not anymore. People are taking it far more seriously. One thing that I did really like was I think it was like 24,000 gay weddings had happened, were noted in the census since gay marriage was legalised in 2017, I think. I do have a bone, though, to pick with the LGBTQIA+ community. I have not been invited to a gay wedding yet.
Oh, me neither.
And what the hell? So I would like that changed.
Already?
Yeah, I would like that changed. Interestingly as well, though, I think that this is only the first drop of data collated from the census. So there's still another couple of drops throughout the year. And I'm intrigued to see what they may bring and what others
It's like Stranger Things Volume 2.
It is. Cute.
Can't
Kate
wait.
Bush running up that hill. That's what the demographers should do.
They should.
They should have like a viewing party of the census and then have it just like skewed to,
Should
we're
leave us-
millennials,
leave
this is
us
what
on
we
it.
demand.
We need a cliffhanger.
What the cliffhanger be in that? Oh my gosh, imagine it's like...
And the number of Australians living in caravans is...
60,000. Okay, gotcha. I think that in future censuses, I think it will be far... Still, just maybe it's because I'm older and it sounds so boring, but because I'm older, I am more interested in this now about what Australia looks like.
Oh yeah, I think it's fascinating. Yeah, for sure. Just the way that the way that we're changing, and I think that we should embrace that. You know, you got to hand it down. It's our turn now.
Yeah. It does make me feel like it's kind of anti-America.
In what way?
In a way that where all of the signs point to being more progressive in the future.
I think so.
Yeah, which gives me life.
Yeah. America's not turning away from religion anytime soon.
No time soon.
Georgie, it's the time of the podcast where we give Flash a shout out. This is the streaming service we work for. It's all about news and all about the news as you want it. One thing I wanted to point out this week is a new documentary that's just dropped. It's called The Trouble with France, and it's from Al Jazeera, which is one of the big names in news in Europe and the Middle East. It's a really interesting documentary about France and the changing face of that country, and how there's a real far-right resurgence in the country. The way that they treat Muslims and the way that they treat people who weren't born in France has changed a little bit. And it sort of examines how France is kind of struggling to live up to its ideals about freedom, equality and fraternity. So that's worth a look.
Oh, I'll have to watch that. I have a bit of a shout out for the platform for which we both work. I've got to do a shout out to our little Thor, Love and Thunder red carpet.
That was fun.
Had the privilege of going to the red carpet to chat to Chris Hemsworth and Taika Waititi, and it was really, really fun, and just a bit of, a bit of colour, a bit of electricity, a little bit of professionally good-looking humans, if you need it for your little pick-me-up.
Yeah, and you asked him quite a saucy question.
I did.
Did you not?
I did. I may have discussed his nude scene.
Ooh.
I went there. And also, though, we're going to give our feedback on the movie. I think there's an embargo, but I have seen it, and we're going to talk about it next week.
Oh, I look forward to that.
So that's like a double plug.
Yeah, very good.
Ha! I'm back. I'm back. I've got to step it up, see? I've got to step it up.
She's a professional, folk.
Well, we will be back next week with so much more to talk about. I mean, as we've said, everything just keeps on happening. I don't think we've had a slow news week in the last 5 years. So remember, here at Flash and Flash Drive, it's all about the news you need, how you want, and when you want. Thanks, J-Lo.
Talk to you next week.